Every single window in the diner was caked with a fine, chalky layer of West Texas dust, but Arthur Vance didn't look out at the landscape. He kept his eyes locked on the grease-stained napkin resting between his calloused hands. On that napkin, written in shaky but deliberate blue ink, was a legal description of a land plot that every major geological surveyor in the state had officially classified as a dead zone. The local cattle ranchers called it the Scrub Sink, a jagged, arid, 600-acre stretch of limestone shelves and dying mesquite trees that couldn't even support a herd of starving goats, let alone yield a single drop of commercial crude oil. When Arthur signed the deed and drained his entire life savings to purchase it, the town didn't just whisper, they laughed out loud. The local newspaper editor even ran a tiny, mocking headline in the weekly opinion column that read, "Local mechanic buys the world's most expensive sandbox." They literally called him crazy to his face whenever he walked into the hardware store to buy fencing supplies. But Arthur didn't argue, he didn't defend himself, and he certainly didn't laugh back. He simply folded the napkin, tucked it into his breast pocket, and drove his sputtering 1984 pickup truck straight toward the wasteland he now owned. He knew something the corporate surveyors had completely missed, a tiny anomaly buried deep within 40 years of forgotten, handwritten drilling logs. To understand why the entire county thought Arthur had completely lost his mind, you have to understand the history of the Scrub Sink. Back in the mid-1980s, during the height of the initial Texas oil boom, a massive independent energy conglomerate brought 3 state-of-the-art rotary drilling rigs to that exact piece of land. They spent 4 months tearing into the earth, fracturing the limestone, and running advanced seismic testing. The result was a catastrophic financial failure. Every single well they drilled came up bone dry, showing nothing but brackish saltwater and highly compressed pockets of worthless nitrogen gas. The company went completely bankrupt trying to force production out of the stubborn rock, leaving behind a graveyard of rusted iron casings and a localized myth that the land was cursed. For 40 long years, that failure stood as an absolute mathematical law among local oilmen. If a multi-million-dollar corporation with a team of Ivy League geologists couldn't find a single barrel of oil in the Scrub Sink, then there simply wasn't any oil to be found. Arthur Vance, however, was not an Ivy League geologist. He was a retired diesel mechanic who had spent 3 decades fixing the heavy mud pumps and drill string engines for those very same oil companies. He understood the mechanical reality of drilling, the way machinery behaves when it hits different types of subterranean strata. More importantly, Arthur possessed a stack of water-damaged, handwritten journals that had belonged to his late father, a wildcat rig superintendent who had worked the 3rd dry well in 1985. While the corporate executives were looking exclusively at the electronic readings on their primitive digital layout charts, Arthur's father had been monitoring the physical vibration of the drill pipe itself. In his final journal entry before the site was permanently abandoned, he noted a highly unusual, violent 3-minute chatter in the mechanical drive sequence at exactly 9,400 feet. The corporate log listed that specific depth as solid, impermeable granite basement rock, which meant the absolute end of the line for oil exploration. But Arthur's father had written a single, underlined sentence underneath his mechanical notes. The bit didn't dull like it hit granite, it bounced like it hit a pressurized pocket of trapped chert overlying an inverted fault line. That single sentence haunted Arthur for decades. When his father passed away, leaving him nothing but those journals and an old toolbox, Arthur decided to prove the old man right. He spent 5 years living on canned beans, taking every miserable midnight repair job that came his way, and skimping on his own medical bills just to scrape together the $85,000 needed to buy the despised acreage at a state tax auction. The day he took ownership, he didn't hire an expensive modern drilling crew. He couldn't afford one. Instead, he tracked down a semi-retired wildcatter named Jed who owned a battered, ancient cable tool rig from the 1970s, a slow, pounding relic that literally drops a massive steel bit repeatedly into the earth to smash through rock rather than drilling through it with high-speed rotary teeth. The townspeople gathered along the public dirt road just outside Arthur's property line on the morning the old rig started up. They brought lawn chairs and coolers of beer, treating the entire operation like a local comedy show. "Hey Arthur," one rancher yelled through a megaphone, "are you drilling for oil or are you just trying to dig a hole deep enough to bury your common sense?" Arthur ignored them. He stood right next to the pounding, smoking diesel engine of the ancient rig, his hand resting lightly on the vibrating steel cable, feeling the precise rhythm of the heavy iron bit striking the earth thousands of feet below. Day after day, the machine went thump, 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 progressing at an agonizingly slow pace of only 30 feet per day. Weeks turned into months. Arthur's bank account dwindled down to his final $300. Jed, the operator, wiped grease from his forehead and shook his head, telling Arthur they were out of fuel money and out of options. They were sitting at exactly 9,380 feet. Only 20 feet away from his father's mysterious marker. Arthur looked at his remaining money, looked at the rusted rig, and told Jed to burn the very last gallon of fuel they had. The old engine let out a fierce, dark plume of exhaust, the cable dropped down hard into the dark hole one more time, and suddenly, the rhythmic pounding completely stopped. The cable went completely slack, swaying limply in the desert wind. A deafening, absolute silence fell over the entire field as the old rig's engine sputtered out. The silence that settled over the scrub sink wasn't just quiet, it was suffocating. For 10 agonizing seconds, nobody moved. The onlookers on the dirt road stopped laughing, their beers lowered, staring intently at the slack steel cable swaying lazily in the Texas wind. Had Arthur's ancient machine finally suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure, snapping the main line and dropping a priceless steel bit to the bottom of a dead hole? Or had they just punched through into an empty, hollow cavern of worthless air? Jed slowly stepped back from the control panel, his eyes wide with an old wildcatter's instinct, whispering a single word, "Run." But Arthur didn't run. He stood frozen, his eyes glued to the open wellhead casing sticking out of the dusty earth. Deep within the darkness of that steel pipe, a low, guttural growl began to rumble, a sound that didn't just vibrate in the ears, but thudded violently in the chests of everyone standing within a mile of the field. The ground beneath their boots began to tremble as the trapped secrets of 40 years began their violent ascent to the surface. If you've ever doubted that a single stubborn person can completely shatter the consensus of multi-million-dollar corporations, what happened next will change your mind forever. Drop a comment right now below if you would have backed out when the bank account hit $300, or if you would have risked it all like Arthur did. The dark rumble deep inside the earth rapidly transformed into a terrifying, high-pitched shriek as decades of immense, inverted geological pressure finally found an escape hatch. Suddenly, a massive, towering column of thick, emerald-green fluid violently erupted from the wellhead, blasting 300 feet straight into the blue Texas sky and completely obliterating the top wooden section of Jed's ancient drilling rig. It wasn't the black, watery sludge typical of a dying, low-pressure reservoir. This was pure, light sweet crude oil, the rarest, highest-grade petroleum on the planet, practically bursting with stored energy. The immense spray caught the midday sun, creating a surreal, shimmering emerald rainbow that cast a brilliant shadow over the barren limestone floor of the scrub sink. The very land they called a worthless sandbox was sitting directly on top of the largest untapped, pressurized independent oil pocket discovered in the state since the turn of the century. The crowd of mocking onlookers scrambled backward in absolute panic, their lawn chairs overturning and their coolers spilling into the dirt as the heavy, sweet-smelling rain of pristine green crude began to coat their trucks. The local newspaper editor, who had arrived specifically to take a mocking photograph of Arthur's ultimate failure, stood completely frozen as the expensive lens of his camera was thoroughly drenched in valuable petroleum. Arthur Vance didn't move an inch. He stood right at the epicenter of the falling oil rain, his face completely covered in the slick, green fluid, looking straight up into the roaring sky with tears finally carving clean lines down his grease-stained cheeks. He reached into his thoroughly soaked shirt pocket and pulled out his father's water-damaged journal, holding it tightly against his chest. The old man wasn't crazy. The machinery hadn't lied. The Ivy League experts had simply relied too much on their digital screens. While a tired rig superintendent had listened to the honest, physical language of the earth itself. Within 48 hours, the entire landscape of the county changed forever. The major energy conglomerates that had openly mocked Arthur were suddenly sending fleets of sleek black executive SUVs tearing down that dusty road, desperate to offer him multi-million-dollar buyout contracts. But the power dynamic had completely flipped. Arthur turned them all away, choosing instead to partner with local independent operators to develop the field on his own terms. The drilling results didn't just prove a point, they completely rewrite the geological maps of West Texas, cementing Arthur's legacy as the man who turned a despised wasteland into an absolute empire. This incredible story is a powerful reminder that the loudest critics in your life rarely possess the full picture, and the ultimate validation always comes from trusting the hard, unvarnished truth of your own work. If you found Arthur's ultimate victory against all odds deeply satisfying, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now and smash the like video button to help us share more incredible, untold true stories just like this one. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss a single chapter of human resilience, and check out our pinned comment below to let us know what you think Arthur should do with his massive new fortune. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the very next story.